Hi, I'm Micah Clark. Today we have a long video. We've got 14 bills I'm going to cover. You may wonder why so many bills. We're at the halfway point right now. All the bills that have passed through will now go to their opposite chamber. Next week, the legislature is not in session for the full week. They're taking a week off. First time I think they've done that in a long, long time. I talked to a lot of legislators who are very excited about that. They probably need the break, and then they will come back the week after and start with a three-step process: committee hearings, floor amendments, and then final vote. So these are some bills that we're watching that I thought would be of interest to you. And if you're overwhelmed, on Wednesday, my email will list all these out. I'm taking this already from my email that I'm working on next week. So I have 14 bills. Some of these will interest you, I'm certain, and we've talked about some of them before. Some of them I haven't. They're bills we're simply monitoring and watching the progress of that I think would be of interest to you. So let me start. And Senate Bill 11, we've mentioned before. This bill requires social media operators to obtain parental consent if a child under 16 is using social media. It's a tool for parents. The bill's passed the Senate. Senate Bill 143 is the parental rights bill, which we've talked about, did an entire show on. Had a legislator come up and thank me for that when I was down there the other day. And he was co-author of the bill. He said he sent it around quite a bit, but explaining why elevating parental rights is important, what it means, what it doesn't mean, and how the law was written to fit and to restrain government or balance the rights of parents with the interests of government. That's Senate Bill 143. That bill is going to the House as well. Senate Bill 255. This is a bill I have not mentioned. It's an education bill. Has a lot of pages to it. There's a couple sentences in it that we were interested in that's going through. I think the bill is titled Education Matters. But one of the things this bill does that we're interested in is that it extends the time for release time high school students can have for religious instruction. So in that bill, I think passed 49-0. It's going to the House. Senate Bill 287. This bill would require, we talked about this I think last week, will require school board candidates to run like every other office holder in a primary and a fall election, and will require them to have a political party label. So it would make school board races just like every other office that you vote for in May and in November. That bill narrowly passed by one vote. There's another version I'll get to in just a second, but I know this is an issue a lot of people have asked me about because they feel like they don't have enough information when they go and vote on school board candidates because they don't know what they stand for. They don't even know their political ideology. The purpose of this bill is to better inform voters by at least requiring the candidate to either be Republican, Democrat, or independent. Senate Bill 289 is next. This bill places limits on DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion programs in classes and state government entities. That's a bill that got a lot of attention early on, moved pretty quickly, and is now will be in the House next week. Senate Bill 442, mentioned this before. This bill requires school board members to review sex education materials to approve them. And it says nothing that the school board doesn't approve can be allowed in the school. And it requires some description of that to be posted on the school website, if the school board even chooses to do that, just so parents can know in advance what their kids might be taught and talk to the teacher if they want to. A bill I haven't also mentioned that came up last year, passed the Senate, didn't move in the House. We'll see what happens this year. Senate Bill 523 would allow a school to bring in a school chaplain to help with counseling. There's a need, as you know, for counseling in schools, and so this would expand that from just counselors to also a school could have school chaplains if they choose. Another Senate bill, and I've not talked about this in previous shows. Sometimes these things come up, they're important, sometimes they're not. There's quite a few of these. There's certainly not 1,400 bills like this, but you have something else other than a bill, and I never really discussed this. It's called a resolution. A resolution is usually a statement of the legislature. A lot of times it's not even law. It might be recognizing the high school team that won the state championship. It might be remembering a legislator who's passed away. Sometimes they will rename things. But this resolution is just a statement of the Senate. We'll see if the House acts on it. It's Senate Concurrent Resolution 8, which means concurrent means it goes through both chambers. It simply condemns religious persecution worldwide. It's a statement by the legislature. It's an interesting read if you want to look at that. When you go into the legislation button on the website, you'll see bills, then you'll see resolutions, and you can pull up those resolutions and look at those. And that was SCR 8. Now on to the House. Again, House bills I'm talking about will be in the Senate in a week and a half. House Bill 1041 we talked about, protects girls' sports at the collegiate level, says that males, biological males, cannot participate in girls' sports. It's a fairness issue. It's a safety issue. And we spent a great deal of time talking about that. That bill moved through. It kind of surprised me, by the way. And in fact, I got something a little bit wrong in my email on Wednesday. When it went through the committee, and I watched the committee hearing, the testimony, all the Democrats except one on the committee voted for the bill, which surprised me because 2 years ago when we had a bill just dealing with K through 12, all the Democrats voted against it. But the polling has shifted on this so much. I mentioned the New York Times poll showing, I think, 94% support for this among Republicans, 67% support among Democrats, and I think 64% among independents. Overall, it was 79% of people in this New York Times poll say men should not play in girls' sports. I thought the Democrats would reflect that in their vote on the floor. They really didn't. There were 4 Democrats who switched. Surprisingly, there was one Republican, Ed Clare in southern Indiana, who's pretty liberal on social issues. He voted against the bill. Again, 94% of the Republicans in his district would probably oppose him on that or disagree with him on that. But that was House Bill 1041, and I think that will move in the Senate in a few weeks. House Bill 1230. This is similar to Senate Bill 287 a little bit. It also does the same type of thing regarding school board candidates' elections, but it wouldn't require them to run in both the primary and the fall. Right now, school board candidates only run in the primary, but it would require political party affiliation. So it's kind of a lesser version of Senate Bill 287. That's House Bill 1230. That moved through the House. One of those two, I think, will get passed. We'll see which one, either the stronger one, I think, that runs school board candidates just like every other candidate, or just in the primary as we are now with a required party affiliation. Now, the opposition to 287, by the way, is that it costs a lot for candidates to run in a primary and a general election. I agree. You do want, school board candidates don't have a lot of money, but I could say the same thing about a county surveyor who has to do that, a county clerk, or a county coroner sometimes don't have a lot of money to do that. So I don't know. There's part of me that says if you're a candidate on the ballot, you're going to run like every other candidate. But I think 1230 is still a good bill. It would require that when they run in the primary like they have, just to have a political party affiliation so voters know kind of some of the worldview of the candidates they're running. The next bill is House Bill 1348. This is a bill I haven't talked about. It's not a major bill, but it applies particularly to some private schools and particularly also to homeschool families. It says the high school diploma issued by a non-accredited public school meets the requirements to complete a high school diploma. So there was some discrimination brought up in the committee hearing. One example was some police officers or people who wanted to be police officers who were homeschooled, educated at home, ran into some problems. The author, Tim Wesco, is sensitive to those issues and I think was homeschooled as a child. And so this equalizes those things. You can't really discriminate against those different diplomas. So that's House Bill 1348. Another bill is House Bill 1393. This bill requires Indiana law enforcement to notify immigration authorities if they arrest someone and believe them or find out that they are not legal citizens, to notify ICE or DHS. And there's actually 2 bills like this. I forget the other bill. It's authored by J.D. Prescott. As this bill, 1393, was authored by Garrett Bascom, a new state legislator from Southeast Indiana. Now, the last two bills I'm going to mention are bills I know you're hearing a lot about. We don't really take a position on these two issues, but they certainly concern families quite a bit. And there are things that we want in one bill in particular, and that's the budget bill. And there's always things in there we watch concerning funding. We don't usually lobby on the bill, but House Bill 1001 I wanted to mention has passed, or will pass, passed yesterday, the House, and that is the big budget bill. And the big debate there is, part of it is the partisan debate. The Democrats think the Republicans who are in the majority aren't spending enough on education. There's other things they don't like about that. That happens every year, no matter who's in the majority. But the real significant battle over that, because Republicans have a supermajority, is between Republicans against Republicans. And you might think that's kind of strange, but it seems like there's always this case where the House has certain priorities and the Senate has certain funding and spending priorities. And so they come up with slightly different bills, and then they fight over that, negotiate over that, and you come up with a compromise at the end of the session. That's really where this budget is going to be changed. That the differences between the House and Senate, and when the fiscal analysis or fiscal projection comes out in April, that's really going to show the state and all the legislators, based on what they forecast revenues to be, how much money they can or can't spend. And so that's House Bill 1001. The other bill you're hearing a lot about is also the first bill filed in the Senate, and that's Senate Bill 1. That's property taxes. Now, don't expect me or ask me to explain these things. It's very complex, and I think that's one of the problems Republicans have, is that they are trying to, in general, not all of them, but leadership seems to want to curtail the increase we've seen in property taxes over the last 3 years and bring them back down to where they were 3 years ago. So they're trying to curtail the growth of property taxes. The governor, however, campaigned on and wants to actually reduce property taxes. So he wants to go like this, they want to go like this. And so that's the debate. How significantly do we cut property taxes, or are we controlling property taxes? And a lot of that's going to depend, again, on the fiscal forecast that we have in April as to how much money we can put towards reducing taxes. But it's an interesting battle between the new governor, Governor Braun, and the legislature. And that's going to take place with both these bills. We're not really going to know what's in the budget or what the final version of Senate Bill 1 on property taxes is going to look like until April, when we have those better numbers, and we'll see what they do in the last few days of the session. So, went through 14 bills very quickly, kind of surprising. A lot to deal with this time. And of course, as I've said before, there's always bills I want to see pass that don't pass. So this is kind of the best of times, worst of times in the middle of session. There's things I wish they would have addressed that I've mentioned before on some social issues. But we have a lot to work with. And as always, there'll be other things come up where legislators try to salvage some of those bills. They wanted to see action that didn't, and they put them in as amendments, or amendments come up on topics that are significant pieces of legislation that we'll talk about if those pop up in the remaining 2 months of the session. So we'll see what happens. Very busy time. Looking forward to their week off, and we kind of regroup, and stage 2 happens, and we'll go back down there and try and be your eyes and ears for the State House, so you know what's going on in your Indiana General Assembly, and so you can contact those who represent you and let them know what you think about issues. But they are not going to be there next week, so just an FYI. Doesn't mean you can't call their staff and leave a message about a bill I mentioned, or you'll see in my email on Wednesday. But they will get going again the week after with committee hearings, floor votes, and final votes with floor amendments and final votes. So, but that will take weeks. There will probably be 3 or 4 weeks of committee hearings again on far fewer bills. Again, also, if you were watching a bill, one of the 1,400 plus that were filed, and you look online and it has not gone beyond the committee stage where you see it's passed out of committee and passed the full House or Senate. Those bills are dead. So we have a lot less to watch, but still a lot of activity going on down there. They'll still be quite busy. But we've passed that first hurdle, and I appreciate you calling your legislator, being involved, watching these videos, reading our weekly email so you know what's going on in your state house, because news sources are kind of difficult to find anymore on a lot of these issues. So thank you for joining me today. Micah Clark with American Family Association of India. I hope you have a wonderful weekend.